Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Tony Dudzik, pick Guardian.
Jared Brandon with the Brandon One pickups.
Hey everybody, it's me, Todd Novak. Welcome to the Guitar Knobs podcast. We are thrilled to death you are listening to our show with us, the Guitar Knobs, on the Guitar Knobs podcast. We've said it twice now. Hopefully you know where you're at and what you're doing. We're thrilled for this show. This show is there's many thrilling things about this show. And Jared and Tony, what is the number one most thrilling thing about this show tonight?
Having you announce it?
Well, that's a close second. What's the first?
We have a guest tonight.
A guest?
Okay, that's the third in line after the second. What is the number one most important thing about this podcast?
We like to talk about gear.
Damn you. It's the 200th episode of the Guitar Knobs podcast. This
200?
is 200.
I demand a recount.
Now, when you just say the word 200, it just sounds like, well, it's 200. I got $100 or I got $200. I can maybe get a pedal for $200, whatever. No. This is 200 manually operated, manually recorded, manually edited, all the manuals, 200 actual shows that we've done since.
You're going to count the first one, huh?
Of course I'm counting the first one.
You're talking 2 George Washingtons and 2 zeros at the end of it.
That's right.
Yes. How many is that in pennies? Jared, do the math. So
2,000
this
pennies.
is, wow, that's pretty good.
It's not that hard.
It's not that hard. I can do it. Anyways, it's really exciting because I'll just briefly touch on this really quick. This started off as a bit of a challenge to myself because I wasn't hearing everything I wanted to hear. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to get deeper into this guitar enthusiasm and community that I was kind of standing on the fringe of. And I felt that this would be a good vehicle to do that. And I've been incredibly fortunate to have Tony and Jared pretty much on the other mics almost the whole time, except for maybe about the first, 30, 50 episodes or whatever.
20.
But who's counting?
5.
This is a big deal for me, probably more than anybody else. But I'm just grateful that we're here. We're about to enter our 5th year of operation next year, 2021. We started in 2016. That's 5 years.
Crazy.
Jared, what is that in pennies?
That's a hell of a lot of copper.
Anyway, so that's the big hoo-ha. Now, the good thing for you, especially our patrons, is this is going to be a crap ton of giveaways this week.
Hold on to your hats.
Oh, baby. We got some good stuff. So be checking out the old Instagrams for that. All right. We've got somebody very special, and this is a 3-peater.
No.
Is this a 4-peater?
I've technically been on 4. Once was
This is 4?
Once was hanging out during the Dr. Z one.
That's right.
Yeah. So 3 is a.
Who are you,
speaking
4-peater?
I'm Rob Chafe of Mad Cow Amplification.
Right on.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't he get a jacket?
Hey, I don't have any
I
of
do
the
have a fez, so.
I could probably get one of those like Little League jackets, with the white cotton on the inside and the iron-on in the back. That'd be kind of cool.
And is it
nice.
like
The 5-peater
for a
lounge.
5-year-old?
Or I could get like orange jackets like the Masters
That would be cool.
for anybody after a 3-peat. That's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we have Rob here, and for those who aren't aware, Rob, give him the 5-second.
What do I do?
Yeah.
Repair electronic musical equipment, primarily guitar amps, build pedal boards for guys, modify amps, build custom amps, that kind of stuff.
Right. And one of the things that we love about Rob is that he's raw, he's honest, and the quality is 1 million times. That is the only thing that matters.
Yeah. You can call me a nutbag. I absolutely. Yeah.
That's what we want, and I think that's one of the things that when we're looking at our amps and it's broke, we're like, crap, I'm gonna get soaked on this because I don't know, how do you trust somebody? Is this right? Is this wrong? And you specialize almost in pointing out like, oh, this is what somebody who didn't know what they were doing did, and that's why your amp doesn't work.
Yep.
That's always my favorite stuff to see. So tonight, this is the super special part number 2, because the world, the music world as we know it, is in a bit of a lockdown. But that doesn't mean you have to be at home. That poses a problem for many people out there who have invested in awesome gear to play their guitars. And Rob is here today, since he is an amp specialist, to help us understand how. Jared, give us the title of the show. Jared, what is the name of this show? Snorty Mc.
Well, today's show is going to be called How to Plug In and Not Get Kicked Out of the House.
Close.
How about
Yeah,
how to plug in without getting kicked out?
Of the house. Yeah, how to plug your electric guitar in an amplifier and then not getting yelled at the same time.
That's the abridged version, everybody.
Yes. More words, please.
Yeah, 'cause
I have to make this into a title. This is how to plug in without getting kicked out, everybody.
That's
and
right.
Jared did actually come up with that the first time. Okay, so this is going to be all about maximizing the gear that you have, and maybe even finding a couple new things, that can help you still do the thing you love doing, playing the guitar, without having to compromise to the point where you don't feel like you're doing the same thing you were before, to the best of the technical world's ability. And we're going to do that with Rob's help, because he knows amps better than just about anybody.
Ooh.
So, all right. And for reference, we did do one just recently with Eric Marrow, and that was more about recording at home with your amp, or possibly with some smaller, like pedal board devices, etc. You could still do all that, but we have amps. We love amps. It's the feel that we need, and sometimes that can't be satisfied simply through headphones. So this is how we're going to try to work around that for everybody. Okay.
Yep.
This is going to be a blast. All right. A couple of things we want to say thank you to
Road
for our 200th show. Thank you for helping to make this possible with our voices through these awesome machines, the Rodecaster Pro and
Yummy.
the Procaster mics.
Even yummier.
Yes. So much thanks to Rode mics. Really, I guess that's about it. We need to move on. We got a long show, everybody.
Thanks, Road.
Thank you, Rode. Let's just do a quick roundabout on what everybody's got going on in the music world this week, and we'll keep it, don't need any 20-minute things that you got from DH Gate, but
I sense that was aimed at me.
no.
Was that aimed at me, Todd?
Oh, yes.
Huh.
All right, Tony, do it to it, and then we'll kick Rob in here.
All right. Well, this isn't so much about music, although it does relate. I am just, and I'm sure Jared is, and probably Rob have had the same issues with shipping. And right now, it is insanity. I'm almost considering saying I'm not shipping anything until after the first of the year. I've talked to FedEx, UPS, the post office. Everybody is so jam-packed and behind. It's taking forever to get stuff. I mean, priority mail used to be 2 or 3 days. Now if it gets there within a week, it's a miracle. I've tracked things that have come and I've shipped via FedEx and UPS, and there is no rhyme or reason. Things are just bouncing all over the country. And it's very frustrating, especially for customers, but it's troublesome and worrisome for me, because, you want to make sure product is getting to the people that have paid for this stuff. And it's just insane. And there doesn't really seem to be, any end in sight, because I think a lot of people this year are, instead of, visiting for Christmas or the holidays, they're having stuff shipped, and it's going to, I'm sure, be crazy cool for Amazon and some of the other places. But I mean, it's just really putting a bind into the system and making a mess of things. Have you guys experienced that yet?
Oh my goodness, yes. I ship, pickups overseas a lot, and I switched to UPS when it comes to shipping overseas because I've gotten burned about, 6 times in the past 7 months. But lately I've just been shipping UPS, and I've had good luck with UPS overseas. Priority mail I'm still shipping within the States, and I have not had a problem with it getting there on time. That's a different story, but as far as just not losing a package, UPS for international, and then USPS for within the United States has been working for me. It's like getting to the people. So
side note,
you just
Jared,
got to use what's working.
Here's a side note for you, Jared. What's the price difference USPS versus UPS for international?
USPS right now, the average is around $38 for USPS small flat rate box, and that's what I use for pickups. And then UPS is about $6 more.
Oh, that's nothing. Okay.
But it's like it's getting there within 6 days.
That's
instead of 30 to 60 days.
Oh, I sent out a little interface box right when this all went down. It left end of April, and I think the customer finally emailed me in July that he got it. A guy in Sweden or Norway or something.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It sat in customs in New York for something stupid like 45 or 60 days.
And I've had things that I've imported that sat in New York and did nothing.
Yep, that's what this was.
I can go on and on and on about it, and I won't, but it's been really bad. Yeah. So, but so is 2020.
So
that sounds like a fun week in Tony's music world there.
Oh, it's just great. I mean, it's and I was at the post office today, and I'm there every day anyhow. And the guy that usually waits on me says, there's 61 trucks waiting to be unloaded at the main distribution center. Gosh. And this stuff, I mean, and they're advising everybody to ship early. I think normally it's like a week before Christmas,
right?
Is the cutoff. I think it's going to be more like 2 weeks before Christmas if you want to get it there. But enough about me.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Let's see. Go, man.
My music.
Go,
week?
Rob.
So, really nothing in my personal music week going on. I just finished up a new set of mods for a Fender Supersonic Friday.
Cool.
So that was great to get that off my plate and just wrap it up. It's sometimes when doing mods, they come together right away, and it takes me an afternoon, and then other ones were like this where it was on and off for 6 months. So it was,
the Supersonic, can you give
what it is?
Just a real brief overview, because that's one that I feel like I want. Because it's cool sounding.
Well, yeah, and that's I won't sign off on doing mods on just anything, because there can be so much time invested in working them out, trial and error, and research into it. So I try to only take on mods I think I can repeat over and over and over again. And the Supersonic, they make 3 of them. They make 22, 60, and 100 watt, or made 100 watt. And it's 2-channel amp. It's supposed to be a Fender Clean and a modified Marshall Dirty. Exactly. Yeah.
I do want one of these.
And
my.
And the 22 is 6v6, like deluxe reverb output section. Single 112. And then the 60, I think, is available in a head or a 112, and that's 6L6 output, 60 watts. So it's a neat platform. So I had a very good longtime customer call me and say, hey, I've got a 22. It's cool, but this is wrong with it, and I wish it did this, wish it did that. And I said, yeah, bring it on in. I took a look at schematic. I was like, yeah, I think we can work this out easy enough. I was wrong. It took me 6 months. It took me 6 months to get it right.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of those.
Yeah. And it's just, it is what it is. It's
Is
sometimes.
it better left undone?
See what?
Is it better left undone?
Oh no, not like the difference unmodded versus when I got it right finally. No, it makes the unmodded one sound broken. Like there's something wrong with the amping comparison. It is a night and day difference.
Okay, so if I do get one,
do these mods.
I'll just give it to you before I even start.
No, actually, play on it for 2 weeks.
I'll play on it for 2 weeks and then I'll.
So that way, when
like
you
I
get
said,
it back,
like
you can
I
go,
said.
oh, okay, I do hear the, Yeah, no, it's, yeah. So it was great. I spent actually this morning before the customer picked up, I did one final play test and go through all my testing guitars, P90s, single coils, about everything,
Right.
turning all the knobs every which way. Because basically, after I do a mod, I want to make sure that a lot of amps only sound good with certain settings. Like if the tone's not between 5 and 6, it doesn't sound right, or this. The whole point for me doing a mod is that you can turn any knob any direction and it'll be musical,
Right.
So, so I did that this morning for an hour and said goodbye to it. So
That's awesome.
It was nice to get that done. Yeah.
That's awesome. I've actually spotted a couple and I'm a big Oasis fan. I'm like, if nothing else, I want it because it's like, supersonic. But anyways, I know that's stupid and cheesy, but
no, no.
Anyways, Jared, how about yourself?
Got me a new toy. Got one of those Tonewood amp thingy.
Oh, that's
Oh
right.
yeah. How is that?
It came a day late, but
Was it $1 short?
I hear
No,
there's
it's
shipping
not.
problems going on right
Yeah.
now, Jared.
I've been told.
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's right. We were just talking about that, right? No, it's awesome package, great packaging. Very, very nice unit. It takes 3 AA's.
Hey, Jared, can I pause you? What is a Tonewood?
You plug your acoustic guitar into it and you magnetically stick it to the back of the guitar, and there's a kind of like a rubber excuse me. Kind of like a
I
rubber
heard him
mat.
swallow after it.
Jiminy Christmas, that kielbasa really needed to get out.
Yeah.
No, so the way it works is there's a rubber grommet on the back that's, you can kind of push it in and out, but that rests against the wood of your guitar. And
And on the inside is a magnet.
the magnet holds the unit onto the back of the guitar,
Right.
and it basically turns your guitar into a speaker.
Yeah.
So you can run effects through the natural sound of your guitar while whatever's going through your acoustic guitar.
Okay. Okay, so it's like acoustic electric. You have to come out of the plug for the...
Yeah, so you still need the pickups.
Okay,
And if you have like an old Martin or a Gibson that doesn't have a pickup, you gotta get a sound hole pickup.
Gotcha. And then rather than going through a speaker, it uses the body as a
It
transducer.
just uses the body, yeah.
Right. But
and it
the
works
effects are built into the unit, so you
Right.
don't have to go through an
Yeah,
effects.
so
I think
there's
I've seen ads on like Facebook or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah,
for it.
there's a lot of ads, but it's a great unit. It works awesome. So I thought it was just going to be plain Jane, but there's like a little tiny LCD screen on it, and it's got tons of controls. I was really busy today, so I could only, plug it in and put it on and mess with it for maybe 5-10 minutes, but it's got a ton of different effects. And I'm really impressed with it. It certainly enhances your playing experience, whether you're in front of people at a campfire or if you're just at home plucking away at Stairway to Heaven,
Right.
whatever. So it's, it was definitely worth it for me. It's really nice.
That's cool. That's a nice review, Jared. Well done.
How easy is it to switch from guitar to guitar?
Not how Jared switches from guitar to guitar, but how to.
No, there's a thing, of
is
course,
also
the
not
magnet
easy.
bracket that you have to go through the sound hole.
Okay.
So you really want to, if you
put it
have,
on, you want to do it on one guitar.
right, but you can buy more of those magnet bracket doogles and stick it on the inside with stickies.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you remember where it sticks on the back of the guitar.
Okay.
But so you can get multiple magnets and for multiple guitars and use it on different guitars. You just have to have a pickup for each guitar and a magnet doohickey that's glued on the inside.
Cool.
It's really easy. It was well designed.
Neato. Super fantastic. This week, I was able to play around with one of my pedals that is near and dear to my heart because it's directly from Dr. No and signed and all that business, and it's pretty cool.
How about you, Todd?
Thanks, Tony. And that's the Colossus. I think this came out about 2018. It is a high gain booster with an Octavia fuzz built in that you can either operate each on their own or in sync together, and it just makes some big noise. And there's like two versions of this, like the one or the two. I think it's 1 octave or 2 octaves that
Above.
Yeah. So and it's just super cool to play with. And so I've been trying to figure out, like, okay, how can I use this in one of my songs? Because more so for the Octavia. But then if you do have that on and then you do kick in the boost, it's like, whoa, this thing just totally came alive. So
When you said high boost, or high gain, do you mean high gain as far as amplitude or like gain as far as distortion?
not just amplitude, it does, you can dial up the dirt on it too.
Okay.
But it's not to the point that it's like a full on distortion.
Okay.
So it has gain, it gets dirty. It is not a dirt
Gotcha.
boost.
Gotcha. And if you turn, like, as far as just boosting it, can you get, is that like a 12 dB boost? Like,
You know what?
Wow.
I'm not exactly sure what the, oh yeah, it'll get loud. Yeah.
okay.
Oh yeah.
So then, yeah, I
It
mean,
gets loud, baby.
yeah.
But yeah, it's just a beautiful pedal too. I mean, it's Dr. No stuff, so it's like those pedals are just incredible. So that was really super fun. That's what I've been doing. So thanks, Dr. No. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get right into this giant family size bag of Lay's potato chips-esque program about this subject of how to plug in without getting kicked out.
It's a great title.
TM, Circle R, Jared.
Right. If I could remember my own title.
Okay. So here's the setup, everybody. You've got all your gear that you've been accumulating. Maybe you've got your favorite Marshall half stack. You've got deluxe reverb, maybe a new one, maybe an old one. Maybe you got, your orange, just any kind of amp that you would typically be using to gig with, or just playing really loud and being okay with it. But now, with everybody not leaving the house so much, or maybe you've downsized and you're in an apartment or a condo, whatever the case is, you can't rock it like you used to, or you want to continue the feeling of how how it sounds when you're playing live. I know I'm experiencing that. Our previous show that we did with Eric Merrow, we talked about other ways to capture sound, other ways to record sound in your house or your apartment or whatever, mainly for recording and capturing. This is just purely for playing and for the enjoyment of playing, being a guitar gear enthusiast. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the outline for what we're going to cover tonight. First, we're going to work with what you have. Okay, so whatever amps you have in your home, your basement, wherever, this is what's going to help you be able to get the feel out of this. And we'll touch on that again in just a second here. But outline goes, we're going to cover off on some DIY mods that you can do. That's right, I said DIY amp mods. And the amp man is sitting here, and he's got thumbs up approved. The fire marshal's over to the left. He's nodding. Then we've got attenuators. And then we have master volume. Now, that's going to help us work with what you have. Beyond that, we're going to take a look at some low-watt amp options, as well as adjustable wattage amps. And throughout all of this, we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of everything, because with every pro, there is a con. That's one thing that Rob is very scientific about. He wants to make sure that you're not going into this blind. We don't want anybody saying this is absolute gospel. It's like everything. This is just here to help. We'll give us suggestions.
Everything in music is subjective. So
right. I think to help set this up, one of the big reasons that we're talking about this is, well, why can't you just, turn your amp really low? Anybody with an amp that we're kind of considering here, which is like a 15 watt amp and up, maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
Or any. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't turn it up past 1 or 2, maybe, you're really not experiencing what the amp is built to do.
Yeah. Again, it's all about your expectation, what you're hoping to get out of it. And we'll touch on this later, but on some amps, there are several volume controls. So you can turn this one down, but this one up and get closer to that. Other more vintage amps.
I'm being a generalist right now and just saying that's
so
the most common thing. Well, I'm in my basement, but I can't turn it up.
I think that's the biggest thing. Like what I'm imagining here is basically you, Todd, where you used to be playing with a band. You had weekly rehearsal, bi-weekly rehearsal, whatever. And now...
And I know what my amp sounds like when I have it at gig level volume.
And now you're in your basement. You got your kids and your wife upstairs. And if you crack it above 1, they freak out. So you got to try to emulate that feel and that response.
I can turn it down, but it doesn't sound the same.
Exactly.
And I'm not getting the same response from my playing or from whatever I have in my pedal chain either.
Exactly. Your whole rig responds differently.
Yes.
So we're going to try to give you some suggestions.
Oh,
this
is going to be such a good show. My goodness, if we'd only get started with it.
Let's go.
All right, Rob, this is very much your show. We're going to add color to it. So
all right.
get us going.
So we just talked about this. Let me just spend another quick moment talk about expectations. Something that you hit on really quick there. Remember that when you plug into you take your Les Paul out and you plug into your Tube Screamer and this and this and this and your Marshall and you have everything turned up to 5, it's the entire signal chain at that volume with all the knobs set a certain way that's giving you the response you want. And I bring this up to point out that anytime you break that signal chain anywhere with any extra added piece of gear, whether it's passive or something you have to plug in, to power, it's going to alter that signal chain. So all these options we're going to talk about that we add in, just like you said, there's going to be pros and cons, but be aware that it's not going to be 100% the same. There is no way to get that that cranked up tone on 10 at a quieter level.
Right.
It's going to get you close, but there's not going to be any one of these things that just
does it 1-to-1.
Exactly. It's not going to be a 1-to-1. So let's manage our expectations first and foremost.
Yes.
So first thing you wanted to talk about was...
We're going to hit DIY mods. So again, we're going to touch on this is what to do with the stuff you already have.
Yep. And DIY meaning that this is something I would, if
that's
any of my
short for do it yourself.
Yeah, do it yourself. If any of my customers called me and said, "Hey, I don't want to spend any money to bring in an amp and have you do something to it. What can I do to try to achieve this?" These are some thoughts I would give him as quick options they can do safely. One is preamp tube substitution. More so on clean platform amps like a vintage Fender, or like a Dr. Z or maybe a Vox, something that's more clean or just starting to break up, where guys go, yeah, man, I turn it on 1 and it's starting to compress a little bit, but it's already blasting me out of the basement. Mm-hmm. Well, you can change the preamps. You can take out any 12A X7 tube, put in an AU or an AT, and it will lower the volume of your amp. It'll cause it to clip a little sooner, compress a little earlier, and drop the overall output.
Okay, so say that the numbers one more time.
Yeah, any 12AX7 tube. Typically, this is done with the first preamp tube, the V1 position in your amp, or the 12AX7 that's physically closest to the input jack. You can pull that out of your amp, put in a 12AT7 or an AU7, and it'll drop the volume. It'll cause it to clip a little sooner, cause it to compress a little sooner. So to kind of emulate that being cranked up a little more, but at a lower volume.
And that'll still work for gigging too.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are actually quite a few guys. This is a real common thing that a lot of guys do with the Hot Rod Deluxe and DeVille models.
Yes. That's the big reason I got rid of mine. I had a
Goes
Blues
from off to
Blues
on.
Deluxe. And I was like, I'm on one. I can't.
And
it's making my ears bleed. This is ridiculous.
That is something I see so many customers do. They'll swap out that first tube, and it does help. It's not a oh my god change, but it's definitely like, oh, I hear it. Yeah,
okay,
it got me a little bit.
Yeah. So
that's one quick, easy thing. And the beautiful thing about swapping out preamp tubes like this, there's no biasing necessary. Just make sure you line up the pins correctly. Slap it in. You don't like it.
Turn it off. Unplug it. Unplug the tube.
Yep.
Put the new tube in. Bob's your uncle.
You're good.
As they say to our friends.
Hey, Rob.
Here.
Yeah.
Which is the AT or the AU the lower output?
AU is the lower one.
Okay.
I don't have the amplification memorized.
No, I don't.
But,
I just
this would be good to do a little video on the when you have time, Rob.
Assuming you had a video.
Todd thinks I don't work for a living.
No, that's absolutely not true. I know you do.
I tell people whenever my Instagram's the quietest, it's not that I'm not busy. That's actually when I'm the busiest because I'm not even taking time to.
Of course.
So anyway, so that's the first DIY you can do.
Now, will that work with a 70-25 too?
Yes. Do you know what a 70-25 is?
Tony, you're going to screw everybody up here. Math is hard enough.
A 70-25 is the British equivalent of a 12AX7.
Yes, it has actually slightly different specs, though.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
I learned something today.
Slightly different. And nowadays, I believe most 70-25s are just relabeled 12AX7s, but it's kind of like the equivalent between a 5881 and a 6L6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyways, on to something that has something to do with this podcast. Output tube substitutions. Tony, you'll remember these maybe. Do you remember those THD yellow jackets?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. They're still around. You can still buy them.
Oh, I didn't realize. I thought they were off the market because
Nope.
did they cause damage to amplifiers or?
No. The only time they ever caused any damage is people weren't buying the right one for their amplifier or weren't adjusting the bias as the instructions said.
Okay, so I'm going to play dumb guy in the room here for everybody who's sitting there going, what the hell? Okay, so the first one that you talked about, the DIY, right? That was your power amp.
No, preamp.
Preamp, that's what I meant.
Preamp.
I'm already getting mixed up. That's your preamp, okay? Don't
say power amp tube.
I'm sorry. It's my bad. I've had a long day.
Output tube.
Output tube is the ones that we're working on right now. Now, what is the output tube? The
output tube is what they're actually a current amplifying device. That's what gives the amp power to push the speaker.
Okay.
So those typically the larger ones in the amp that are actually what's responsible for the wattage of your amp.
Gotcha. Okay.
And what we're doing here is that you could take an amp, let's say like a super reverb. It's got a duet of 6L6 output tubes around 60 watts.
So that means two. If you don't speak French.
Yeah. Duet. So what you can do is you can take out those output tubes, those two 6L6 output tubes, and there's by a company named THD. They make these adapters called yellow jackets. And they're just these octal bases that you can plug in place of your 6L6 tube, and you plug in a lower wattage EL84 in.
Aha. So from two tubes, you go to one tube.
No, you still go to two.
No, from two tubes, you go to two tubes.
Yep. But
just different.
Exactly.
It's like an adapter, if you will. It just plugs in
and an adapter.
Or a B adapter.
No, only an adapter. It isn't. Yeah, exactly. Just like Tony said, it's an adapter. So you take out the 30 watt per tube 6L6 and you put in replacement a pair of 12 watt EL84s.
Okay.
So you've just dropped the.
Is that going to make it sound pretty different then?
Well, it will also
affect. Is that going to make it sound pretty different?
It will also, just like there's plus and minuses to everything here. And yes, we've effectively dropped the wattage. Let's say of a super, we dropped the wattage by more than half. We've dropped it to a maximum wattage of 24 volts. Huge. That's huge. But we've now put in a different tube that will have a different frequency response. Right. It will break up differently. That's your plus and minus.
Okay. Now again, dumb guy. What causes more, when people are talking about tube amps and stuff and they're saying, okay, this is an EL84 platform or this is a 6V6 or 6L6, those have sounds associated with them.
They do, and it's not justified.
Okay.
I think
Okay. You probably caused about 27 car crashes right there, but
yeah. And each of those tubes do have a stereotypical characteristic frequency response sound to them. But I think you're right. I think people think 6L6 and they think a Super or a Vibrolux, that Fender sound, right?
Right.
Or they think EL34 and they think vintage Marshall, 70s,
right.
Early 80s Marshall. EL84 is a Vox AC30, let's say,
They're
right?
inextricably linked with those sounds.
Yes, and I think the biggest thing is because that was the preferred choice of that iconic manufacturer for the first decade or something.
Gotcha. Okay.
Where you could hear something that has EL34s and you probably be like, oh yeah, it's got what, a 6V6 and a 6V, and they go, no, it's EL34. And you'd be like, what? Wait a minute.
Okay.
So it's not a hard and fast rule, you know?
Gotcha. I just imagined I can't remember, I can never remember his name, but the guy from Simpsons slammed on his brakes and goes, Shaw. Anyway.
Okay.
The guy with the snake on his arm, you know? Anyways.
Anyway.
Way to add color, Todd.
Thanks. I try. I gotta earn my pay here. Okay. So that's another easy one to do. Both of those, unplug your amp.
Yes, I'll get. There's a little bit of a caveat on the Yellow Jacket. There are some amps you do have to adjust the bias on.
Okay.
Okay. And there's
so just do a little bit of homework.
Exactly.
Look at your manual. Maybe look up a few things on YouTube. Call Rob.
Yep. Send me an email. Yep.
Don't call Rob. Send him an email.
Send me an email. Please don't call me.
Don't call him.
What's your number again, Rob?
FaceTime Rob.
Damn you guys.
Okay. What's next?
Okay. Next is a tried and true method. More so the larger Marshalls. Anybody, if Tony, you'll be hip to this too. If you have an amp that has 4 output tubes in it, you remove 2 tubes.
The big question is which 2 tubes, the insides or the outsides?
Well, okay. Almost all vintage amps and most current production amps, if you're looking from the back of your amp, you have 4 large tubes in a line. And just like Tony said, do you take out the 2 inside or the 2 outside? It doesn't matter.
And by inside or outside, we're simply saying in a direct line of 4, the inside would be 2 and 3. The outside would be 1 and 4.
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah, look at me.
Yep. And that works for, I would say, 99% of the amps out there. There's a few of you out there that are going to try to do this. And when you do this, your amp will sound absolutely horrendous. You have the oddball amp brand where they didn't pair them left and right. And literally the matching pairs are 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. So when you pull 2 tubes, you might accidentally remove half the sine wave.
Got it.
Can't do anything for you there.
Okay. So again,
you have to do a little research. Like anything Marshall, anything Fender, you can just pull.
Right.
Too.
Right.
Now, when you do that, you should ideally have the bias adjusted. And again, I list under DIY because a lot of people now have the tools and knowledge to be able to adjust the bias on their own.
And if you want to adjust the bias, that's something that is. There's plenty of documentation on that.
Just Google
online.
it, and you can get these neat probes for people that literally have no idea what they're doing. They plug right into the socket. They give you all your numbers you need, and yeah.
Cool.
So that's definitely, like I said, it's
you
now
can
DIY.
also take this to your local amp expert.
Absolutely.
And have it done.
Yep. So, anyways, but like I said, you removing 2 output tubes typically for the larger. Actually, not typically. It has to be for a larger wattage amp that has 4 output tubes.
Okay, so that would start at. How many watts? Like 50, 40 watts?
Depends on the configuration. Possibly as low as 50 watts if it's got 4 EL84s in it.
Okay.
Typically, a lot of guys were doing with 100-watt Marshalls.
So all the guys with the Sun amps who are like, man,
the really big things. Yeah.
Stupid really COVID.
Yeah, the death metal guys out there.
What if your amp doesn't have tubes?
Well, then you should
Tony, shut up.
Then you should go buy a real amp, then, Tony.
All right.
A question on that. Does will that work with a AC30 that has 4 84s?
Yes, it will. But you would almost definitely have to have your tech go in and swap a resistor, a cathode resistor.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. And actually, and what you're discussing right there is actually, if you ever look on a matchless DC30. It's got a half power switch on the back.
Yep.
And that's exactly what it's doing, is it removes 2 tubes and it switches out the cathode resistor that biases those tubes.
Gotcha.
So there you go. That's exactly
you know what that is. What you're talking about is actually metaphorically like the Dodge, like we'll just say, quote, the Hemi power displacement. What's the cylinder displacement? What's the
correct term?
power
Tony?
displacement?
I believe it's multi-displacement Hemi.
Yes.
Yes. So when you go, you can either have you go from 8 cylinders down to 4 cylinders.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Good analogy, Todd.
Thanks,
Thank you.
man. That's what I'm here for.
All right. So those basically those 4, the swapping out the preamp tubes, putting in yellow jacket converters for output tubes, removing 2 of your output tubes, are 3 of the DIY end user solutions.
Right.
Another one that actually
just really quick. This because I'm also playing like the listener advocate here, which is you just described a whole bunch of technical stuff, and I'm like, man, I can't do that. You can.
Yes, you can.
You can. And there's an amp expert right across from me saying you can do this.
Yep. Go
And I believe
slow.
him.
Do your research. Educate yourself a little bit. This is nothing that's unattainable.
You're not going to blow anything up, pretty much, and you're not going. Okay, I'm going to just back up all that stuff, but you can do it, and it's
can do it.
safe stuff. Just don't have the thing plugged in.
Exactly. The last quick DIY mod that you can do, Todd actually brought up when we were on a phone conversation a couple of days ago. Speaker substitution.
Yes, for your little combo.
Yes,
Or not your combo.
for anything really.
For anything really.
If you let's say you're rocking a Mesa Boogie amp that has one of their I think they're called C90 speakers. It's a 90-watt speaker. It's ungodly efficient and beefy. Efficient meaning that the
it's not going to break up.
it's not going to break up, but from technical terms, for the wattage that you put into it, it will produce a higher SPL than another speaker.
What's an SPL?
Sound pressure level. So actually the volume that your ears hear, it'll create more of that versus another speaker that's less efficient. So the more efficient the speaker, it's going to take that power and use all of it to create more volume. I use description like a boogie. So this is real world. There's lots of guys out there playing in bands that they have this boogie, Mesa Boogie 112 amp, channel switching, all this, and it's great for playing live with their band and everything. They get a home and it's just way too loud in the basement,
Right.
with their wife upstairs and everything. Part of the reason will be that speaker is so efficient. You put the tiniest amount of voltage wattage applied to it, and it's very loud. If you go with a less efficient speaker, which is typically also a lower wattage speaker with smaller magnet, it will noticeably decrease the perceptible volume to you.
Right. And you'll get the breakup earlier, which is what
Exactly.
you're expecting if you have your amp turned up live.
Exactly. It'll be do a little bit of everything there. Yeah.
Cool. And it doesn't have to be just anybody with a Mesa Boogie. You can apply this to just about anything.
Just about anything, yeah. Especially if you've got an amp that has a speaker in it that's more 50 watts or more speaker. If you would put in a 25 watt speaker, you're going to notice a noticeable drop in volume at the same position on your amp.
Right.
And just like you said, it'll also be breaking up a little sooner. It'll be a little softer sounding. Won't be as immediate and as abrasive to you.
Right.
And the beautiful thing is any end user can do this. If you can work a screwdriver, you can pull your speaker out,
Yep.
pop in another one.
Too true.
Yeah.
Too true.
Yep.
Is there a caveat you'd like to give, Rob?
Yes. Don't turn up your amp or don't crank your amp. Let's say you have that Mesa Boogie amp that's a 60 watt 112 combo and you just put a 20 watt greenback in it. Don't turn it up all the way. You will huff your brand new speaker you just put in it. So a little common sense
That's a
has to be
scientific
used
term
there.
for blow it.
Blow it. You'll smell lots of bad things very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is also a kind of a clever way to not necessarily impair your actual. So, like, I got my Supro. Okay, I can unplug that and go into a secondary amp, which I could have basically the lower wattage speaker for at home use.
Yeah. And now you just said secondary amp.
It's a secondary speaker cabinet. Sorry.
Yeah. And it also gives you a reason to buy a new toy at a because you can get a secondhand speaker cabinet for a couple $300.
Oh, yeah.
loaded with something.
Yeah, you can
Right.
could buy a bunch of there's like amps, they're full amps that people can't even give away by certain brand names that we won't mention. That all you got to do is just not use the amp and replace the speaker.
Absolutely.
You're good to go.
Yep. You could do all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Like a PV.
No. Okay.
that's pretty much what PVs
No.
are. No.
What's next?
Okay, so that wraps up DIYs. I thought that was going to take
DIY
10
mods,
minutes, but
that's great.
It took way longer. So
You should know that by now.
yeah.
Nice.
What's second on our
Attenuators.
attenuators? Okay. See, I had this way
the
later.
mystical
but-
world of attenuators.
Okay. So what an
And before you start, for the record, this is not. We could almost do a 101 only on attenuators.
We could almost do a 101 on
any of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we're not.
I'm going to fly
surface
through
level
attenuators.
to
Yes.
just get you, what
Yes.
you need to know.
Okay, so attenuator in general is usually a device that you plug in between your amplifier, your speaker output on your amplifier, and your speaker. Generally, that's what we're going to be talking about when we talk about add-on attenuators. Okay. First, let's start with the passive ones. Passive meaning you don't have to plug any power into it. No 9-volt adapter and no big, AC, IEC power cable. It's completely passive. You take your speaker cable from your output of your amp into this box and another speaker cable out of the box into your speaker itself. Question yet, Todd?
No, I'm just thinking it's like a pillow. Because you got your head and the bed, and in between the head and the bed is your pillow.
Wow.
And it softens things up, and it makes it easier to use. Because otherwise your neck's going to hurt, and it's not going to be good.
Boy, I'd like to live inside your head for a day.
It's a mess.
No.
So these are passive speaker attenuators. Probably the earliest one, I believe, was designed by Ken Fisher, Trainwreck. It was a very simple L
That's
pad.
the name of the thing. You're not calling Ken Fisher a train wreck.
No. That was
Okay.
that was his,
More simple.
his amp, the brand
Like-
of amps he made.
Ken Fisher, train wreck.
He's a train wreck. Oh my god, that's rude.
Yeah.
But anyways, I believe he was responsible for producing and selling the very first one. It was very simple. It was literally a large wattage resistor in there, and then an L pad, a high wattage potentiometer,
Right.
and that's all it was. And basically, it's a big volume knob that would take the power of your amp and turn it down before it went to the speaker.
It's like a marshmallow-sized resistor.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one big
And you could roast marshmallows.
Not the
on
little
it,
kind you
too.
put in your
Yes.
cocoa, like big ones.
Yeah, good point, Tony. They're usually put in oversized boxes because they dissipate a lot of heat.
Gotcha.
And Dr. Z, I don't know if you remember this or not. Remember
I'm
Dr.
familiar
Z?
with Dr. Z.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, Todd, that he spoke when we were up there visiting last year,
Yeah.
that he still makes the air brake, and it's a Ken Fisher design that he still has license to and everything.
Aha.
So that original design is still being made, probably with some tweaks, but Dr. Z, you can go buy that right now.
Okay. And I'm sure Dr. Z would appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're still great units, but that's the most basic, and that's resistive passive attenuator. Only
Okay.
resistors in there. Next one to quickly talk about is the Marshall Power Brake. That is another passive speaker attenuator. They do it in a different way. Rather than resistors, they have a transformer in there that has a bunch of different taps on it. And when you switch attenuation levels, it selects a different tap on the transformer that lowers the output to your speaker.
Okay.
So when it's off, it's a 1-to-1 transformer. The windings are matched 1-to-1. So whatever goes in goes right back out the other side of the transformer.
Right.
But then as you turn it down, it's sending less and less signal out to the speaker.
Got it.
And it's a neat way of doing that because what happens when you play a note on your guitar, it goes through the whole amp, the output tube sends a signal through the transformer to your speaker. And as the speaker moves, the inductance and impedance of that speaker changes every bit of the position as it moves with different frequencies, different amplitudes. Your amplifier sees, in air quotes, those changes from your speaker, and that's what makes your amp and speaker kind of talk to each other. So it becomes a handshake relationship.
Right.
when you put in,
It's kind of like a handshake.
it is, it's just like a handshake. Good Todd.
Oh my God.
You're learning.
Yeah, I'm learning. Thanks. The resistive attenuator, like the Ken Fisher or Dr. Z air brake, breaks that handshake. They don't see each other directly. The Marshall power brake, because it goes through a transformer, those changes are still seen by each other.
They just have gloves on.
Yeah. That's actually
I'm telling
now
you, man.
you nailed it. Now
I
you
always
nailed it.
nail it. What are you talking about?
Yeah, they have gloves on. It's not a direct relationship anymore. So it's not exactly the same, but it's a different kind. It's a different way of doing the same thing.
Right.
Some guys prefer the power brake by Marshall. Some guys prefer something like an air brake from Dr. Z. Two different options.
Right.
Both passive.
Can I ask you a question before you move any further? We just got through talking about speakers and efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
If you get yourself a nice new air brake, but you have a really efficient speaker and you're expecting to hear your amp sound like you want it to sound, is that?
Well, yes and no. You're absolutely right. Part of the whole thing, and what I talk about, it's your rig entirety. Meaning, if you have your amp set on 3, volume-wise 3, just random number, and you're getting the edge of breakup when you dig in hard, that is most likely your preamp, your output, and your speaker all distorting a little bit together.
Gotcha.
So to your point, Todd, when you put in a passive attenuator, but you keep the same speaker, you're going to lose the breakup of the speaker.
Gotcha.
You're going to be able to emulate the rest of your rig breaking up, but you're absolutely right. You're not physically pushing that speaker as hard to break up in the same way.
So for the optimum experience, if you're trying to take your Marshall, insert whatever head, and let's say you got a 4 cabinet, where unless like to get what you want that to sound like, if you are playing at gig volume and you're getting that breakup, an attenuator isn't going to get you is only going to get you kind of there. You need to adjust the speakers.
All of these options will only get you.
Yes, but I'm saying in that chain.
Well, yeah, and now here's the danger of that though too. The more things you change, the further away you're going to get from the initial frequency response too. Because unfortunately, just like we talked about earlier with speakers, we're
never going to get a 1-to-1.
Yeah. So and I do know actually several local players that were doing this pre-pandemic where, to your point, they will use several attenuating devices on an amp, each a little bit, to pull down their amp a more noticeable amount.
Right.
But without just doing drastic side effects for just doing one.
Right.
If that makes sense,
And this is maybe even more applicable to those who are like, just give me a guitar, a chord, and an amp, and that's the sound that I want, but they have to play it louder.
Yeah.
Because you're still going to get like the breakup sound once you start getting into fuzzes and heavy distortions. You're really kind of it's starting to get a little mushy area there.
Well, I would say that, but probably for you completely understand this, Todd, that's not the case, because you probably use some fuzz that has
there's
some gains.
Definitely a difference.
But yeah, unless you get the amp just amplifying.
It's the pushing, it's the amplification, not necessarily that edge of breakup.
Right.
That
and it's two different sounds. If you may actually like that sound where the preamp's cranked, you got a pedal crushing it, and there isn't a whole lot of amplifier or speaker breakup. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, too many variables, too many.
Sure. But a lot of people, especially that listen to the show, have specifically bought like, quote, pedal platform amps. So you can use an attenuator and this will definitely help. But if you're maybe trying to, play like Bonamassa or Stevie Ray Vaughan or something like that, where it's like,
harder.
You're not relying on the pedals. You're going to have to do a couple of these steps probably.
Most likely.
All right.
You're absolutely right. Yep.
Hey, before we move away from passive attenuators, I think one thing to mention, some of them are adjustable, but most are not. You want to make sure that attenuator matches the output of your amplifier in terms of the resistance or the ohms.
The rated impedance. You're absolutely right, Tony. Yeah. Thanks for adding that in. Actually, I would say, probably 9 out of every 10 passive attenuator, you're absolutely right. You have to buy the correct one for your amp, 4, 8, or 16 ohms. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You want to match those. And there are some that are switchable. And actually, one I wanted to mention for the passive thing before we get away from it is the Weber Mass.
MASS?
MASS.
Okay.
They make, I don't know, 5 or 6 of these.
Weber speakers.
Weber speakers. Weber
Right.
speakers. Who
They make
makes
the
this.
attenuator as well.
It's called the Weber Mass Attenuator.
Yes.
And to Tony's point, they make, out of the 5 or 6 they make, 2 or 3 of them are selectable. So you can select 4, 6, 4, 8, or 16, or maybe 2 of those.
Right. Which many amps have that selectability on the back.
Right. But this is nice because typically, let's say you want to use it with your existing 112 cab in your head, let's say.
Yeah.
Well, the cabinet's 8 ohms, so unless you replace a speaker too, you got to make sure that you match the right one
Yeah.
for your rig already.
You just got to do a little.
Research.
Yeah.
The Weber stuff is, a lot of them are adjustable, so you can
That's
buy
cool.
one to use for several amps and use the same one. The other neat thing about the Weber, as far as I know, it's the only company doing this. Rather than just resistors or inductors, transformers in the attenuator, they actually put in a speaker voice coil. So there is a speaker basically inside of every single Weber Mass unit. The neat thing about this is that you can emulate how a speaker might react through resistors, capacitors, inductors, transformers. But this actually has a speaker in it. So what the point there is that the handshake between your amplifier and your speaker is recreated by the pillow between it.
Right.
Yeah. Really
With a
neat.
thinner glove.
Like
a latex glove.
Exactly. And again,
getting weird
as far
now.
as I know, the Weber Mass the only one to have a speaker motor inside their attenuator.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that.
That is neat. Okay, cool.
Really neat. So there you go. So that kind of goes through the passive speaker attenuator options. And again, we didn't mention the 100 different brands that are out
There's
there.
loads and loads of them.
Loads. And like you mentioned earlier, Todd, you can get them on Reverb and eBay for as cheap as like $50, $60 now.
Right.
For bare bones.
But do your homework and find out what you need, what you want.
Exactly. What features you want. And then you just got to try one and see if you like the sound of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's go to the active loads.
Okay.
Typically referred to as reactive loads.
We're still talking about attenuators.
Still attenuators.
Yeah.
But we're on the more big dollar ones, and they're active, meaning that they take some sort of voltage to power them.
Right.
So you're going to run, one of those detachable computer cable IECs to it, or it's going to have a 9-volt or 12-volt adapter to run it.
Right.
Typically with these, almost all of them on the market have IR compatibility, I guess we'd want to say, impulse response.
Right.
So it's not just a box with a few components in it that attenuate the sound down. This will actually pull the signal off of the big amperage that comes out of your amp and then allow you to manipulate it. And it sends it out in many different ways. One is just an attenuator like Jared's aux. It's got a ton of features on it, but one option is to just plug in from your amp, speaker in, and then speaker out to your cabinet. And on the front panel, you have an attenuation dial. And in that box, it is active, but it also does passive attenuation at the same time. Okay. So, but then the added bonus is that you get extra outs, which probably
Direct
into a console.
Right.
You can either go XLR balanced out. You can go USB direct to a DAW unit, or probably how Jared's using them are as headphone. Is that how you're using them?
Yeah. I usually use them for the NAMM shows when, you can be around other people. And yeah, headphones. And basically I bought those that, for people that can listen to an amp like a JCM 800 or a nice Fender amp through headphones, but you're hearing a true, it's better than just, in my opinion, a sound processor,
Right. Yeah. So like what Jared will do, he'll take out his Marshall and plug it into the aux unit.
Right.
And you don't even have to have a speaker attached to it, but you can have a speaker attached to it for the attenuation.
Right.
He's got to go into headphones as well, or like what you said,
Right.
where you go into XLR
any
out.
kind of other,
Exactly.
There's a lot of options. Very, very useful, especially if you're saying I am doing home recording, I am gigging live, I am just playing in a place that I don't want to blow it out.
Exactly.
Very useful.
And I'm going to blow through these really quick. The typical output options you have are balanced output, which is the XLR microphone output to go to a mixer. Headphone output, which is just what it sounds. You can plug in your headphones. So if you have this thing and it's 2 a.m, you want to plug in your rig, but you can't have any sound, you could plug in your headphones, crank up your Marshall amp in your basement, and the family won't hear a thing. USB interface for what you're talking about, recording straight to a DAW, or even just using it to go into your DAW to monitor yourself.
Which is that's what we talked about before. That's your computer interface, essentially.
Yeah. Was it digital audio workstation?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Woo. And then, of course, what we've already talked about, speaker level attenuation, where a lot of these will have speaker level attenuation. You insert it between your power amp and your speaker, and you could still play through your cabinet just at a much lower volume.
Right.
Do your research. There are dozens of different companies making these things. One will have 3 of these options. Another one will have all 4. You just got to decide what options you want. Do you want headphones? Do you even care about that? Do you just want it to be an attenuator?
Do you need a small unit? Are you okay with a big giant thing like an aux?
Yeah. How much money you want to spend? You can get the cheapest. You can get like a 2 notes capture plus, I think, or maybe just capture is the cheapest one now. $200-$300. It's very small. It's small in the size of a brick. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they get the pedal board ones that are specially made for it. Yeah. So you can get all the way from that for a few $100s to the aux, which is, how much is that, Jared? Like
1,400.
Yeah, brand new.
Or if you get 2 of them,
do they give you
then
a
it's
discount?
2,800.
I bought one new and I bought one slightly used.
Oh, so yeah,
2,200.
A couple $100 difference.
And I'm going to ask a stupid question. I think I already know the answer, Jared. Have you ever plugged yours into a DAW, digital audio workstation?
No.
So you're
yes, I absolutely. Yeah, actually, yeah, I did. And you're gonna laugh, but I did use it to record in the GarageBand.
no,
that's what it's. That's what we're
exactly
talking about.
what it's. Yeah.
It sounded absolutely amazing.
Well, yeah. So you did. The reason I asked that question is that in something like the aux, you've got a plethora of cabinet speaker options, microphones, distances. Yes. It's amazing what that thing will do. Plethora.
Yeah. So actually, maybe even more important. So, tiny. We're gonna just look down the side street here. What you just talked about is a major difference between in the digital experience. If you go from like a USB interface and you go into like Logic or something, there are some amp things, there are some cab things, but it's meant to be capturing the sound that you are already creating, whereas GarageBand is very much geared to, I'm just putting an electric signal in. I can plug a guitar into a cheap USB and then choose all my amps and pedals and everything like that. So this is very effective if you're trying to capture your actual sound, your rig, your gig rig into a computer. This is one of the best ways to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much sums up attenuators. Again, going from the passive to the active that have all the bells and whistles like the aux.
Yep. Indeed. All right. Master volume.
Okay. So, so we're going back to an amplifier, no outside add-on like we just talked about. These are all going to be changes you can make, or not changes you can make, changes you can have a tech make to your amplifier. This is no longer DIY.
Right.
You need to take it to a tech. Well, unless you're really handy and already know what you're doing, I suppose.
Let's just say you take it to a tech.
Take it to a tech. So one option is master volume, depending on what your amp circuit is. We're assuming that you're talking about, let's say, deluxe reverb reissue. Okay. There is a volume on it, but there's no, quote, master volume. How the circuit is worked, that volume control on your vintage Fender design is actually an input gain control. That pot comes very, very, very early on in the signal path and controls how much signal goes through the whole amp. When you put a master volume control on your amplifier, that master volume control you're adding is much later in your amp after your preamp. So what I'm getting at here is that if you were to turn up your volume on your Fender Deluxe to 3.5, and you're just starting to get that compression breakup, but your ears are bleeding in the basement, if you were to put a master volume on it, you could then attenuate the signal in the middle of the circuit of the amp, right after the preamp, after it's already starting to clip, but turn it down before it gets to the output section that amplifies it.
Gotcha.
Just like we've talked about before, there's drawbacks on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely...
Well, and master volumes are probably most closely associated with the Marshalls.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's late 70s twin reverbs, quad reverbs, and 800 series Marshalls were some of the first production amps to have master volume controls on them.
But the modification for those, I mean, I know Jared, I think you have 2 of those, right?
I have...
With the master volume mods?
Yeah, I have a Marshall with that mod, and I do have a twin reverb Fender that was brown faced.
Yeah.
So
that's a good sounding amp too. Oof. Yeah,
that's a really dark sounding amp. So if you have like a Stratocaster or a Tele that's got traditional sounding, low wind in pickups, come on, man. I make pickups. I know what pickups are. They sound really good through that amp. It's like, it's not a screechy, high, ice picky sound.
Yeah. But does that one have a master volume on it?
I think it does. I'm pretty sure it does. I
hope so, because we just talked about it for about a good 5 minutes.
And if it does have master volume, it definitely was an original circuit. But yes, I have been putting more master volumes on Fender amps in the past decade than ever before.
Really?
Yeah. Because guys are pre-pandemic, they're taking in their deluxe reverb in venues now.
Yeah.
And the sound guy's yelling at them for bringing in a 22-watt amp.
Yeah.
So the guys are like, man, I want my Fender sound. I need it a little quieter. What do I do? And it's like, well, a master volume is an option now, which is kind of ironic because when they first started putting them on twin reverbs in the late 70s, people hated those things because they didn't sound like a twin anymore.
Right. Now, go ahead, Tony.
I was just going to ask Rob, when you're doing those, are you putting the masters on the back of the amp, or that's the way I remember them, or are you repurposing one of the pots in the on the front face?
I do my best to put them on the back of the amp. Usually, I put it either in place of a foot switch jack that the customer just doesn't use, or the second speaker output is where I usually try to put them. Mm-hmm. Just a couple of reasons. Number one, what the circuitry. So I guess let's back up a little bit and we'll talk about, there's different types of master volumes you can use. Usually in most mods for what you're talking about, like a Fender, let's say a Marshall, you're putting in what's called a post-phase inverter master volume. Post-phase inverter master volume, or known as PPIMV.
That's nothing's known by that.
If you type in PPIMV, this will come up. So, but to Tony's point, so this post-phase inverter master volume, it's after the phase inverter, right before the output tubes. And this is important because this way you get as much of the amp unattenuated as humanly possible. Mm-hmm. And you're attenuating the signal right before it gets to the last.
It's a built-in attenuator.
It really is. Yeah. And my point of why I bring this up now is that where this is inserted in the signal chain is right before the output tubes. So putting it on that back panel in replacement of where speaker jack was keeps things very localized. So you're not running the signal through the whole amp to replace an unused input jack, let's say. Because running that signal through the whole amp, it'll induce noise through the rest of it. And you also lose some signal. Just tone, because you're running through all this extra.
So how would you know if I'm sitting there at home? I'm like, I have a volume knob. Why does my amp need a master volume?
Well, here you go. If your amp only has one volume knob, that is actually an input volume. It's never later in the amp. It's always going to be in
Interesting.
volume.
So my Supro, I could do a master volume mod.
You could. You could, yeah. And kind of keep it simple. Not simple, but another way of analogy, if you look at a mixing console, you got your input gain, you got your fader, right? Mm-hmm. On an amp that only has one volume, that fader is always up all the way all the time. And all you're adjusting is that little input gain knob. Okay?
Interesting.
And there's sometimes with some circuits, you don't have to put in a post-phase inverter master volume. You can actually find that resistor that's always on 10 and change it to a pot. Sometimes you can do that. Other times there's no good way of doing that. You put in a post-phase inverter master volume. And the neat thing about those too is how it actually works. It doesn't change the circuitry around it. So everything still operates like it should. It just
right, so it's not totally destructive.
Exactly. Good.
Which is what a lot of the Marshall ones
they added in. Exactly. It changed how the things around it would work.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. The post-phase inverter master volumes can be very, very transparent how they work.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if someone were to do this, or have someone like you do it, it is reversible should
100%.
they want to go back.
100%. Any decent tech will do it in such a way that it can be reversed and be completely, what's the word I'm looking for? Nobody would be the wiser if they looked at it, you know?
Right.
Yep, absolutely. And that's to the point, like back in the early 80s, guys didn't foresee 70s Marshalls, 70s Fenders, late 60s Fenders being worth anything. So they were drilling holes on face plates and putting in volume, just butchering them, you know, now any tech worth the damn, if you brought in your amp, said, yeah, I want to drill a hole, put a master volume here, they'll go, no.
Yeah.
Take it somewhere else. You know, we're going to, just like Tony said, we're going to find something you're not using, a jack you're not using somewhere.
Sight.
Yeah.
All right. We're 3 out of 5.
Okay.
This is everybody's like, gee, Merry Christmas. How long is this? This is a 200 episode show. That's so,
this seems to be a pattern when I come on those.
It is. But that's just because we have a wealth of knowledge and we want to share it.
Well, I thought you said it had to be 200 minutes long.
Oh, it's going to be well over. I don't know. No, it is. It's going to be almost
3
200
hours.
Yeah, no, it won't be 3 hours. My math.
Yeah, your math.
All right. So we've covered not all the ways, but most of the ways that you're going to be able to moderate the.
I'm sorry. I got to stop you real quick. One more thing about master volume. There's one more option that's super cheap.
Okay.
And completely DIY if you want to do this.
Okay.
If your amp has an effects loop, there are some amps out there that only have one volume.
I thought you were going to say volume pedal.
Yes.
Oh.
No.
You're serious.
I am not kidding.
That's amazing.
I am absolutely not kidding. So if your amp only has
9
one,
for 10 tonight.
If your amp only has one volume control but does have an effects loop, and there's some out there. I'm trying to think. I think maybe Benson or Milkman makes some like this, but they have an effects loop, but it's only got 3 or 4 tone control and one volume on it.
Right.
Yeah, put a volume pedal in the effects loop, or GHS actually makes a tiny little black box that has just a passive.
It's called the black box.
There you go. And all that is, it's just a audio potentiometer that will, right. It attenuates the signal after the preamp, before the power amp.
Yes.
And that's something that you can buy for $40-$50, put in. If you like it, great. If you don't, no big deal.
Yeah.
You're not out much money. So,
right.
Sorry, I had to put that one in there.
No, excellent. That's great. So we've handled all the things that with your existing gear. We've pretty much got you on the road to, is it road to perdition? Is perdition bad?
Perdition is bad.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I second guessed myself. I was like, wait, no, perdition bad.
No, we got you on the road to success.
The road to success, the road to glory in your in your now much more quieter playing space.
Hopefully, yes.
Okay,
unless you're in a Black Sabbath cover band.
Right, yes. And then there's, that's a whole other thing.
And we talked about this before when we first started about putting several of these things together. There's one local player in particular that has done exactly that. They've switched the first preamp tube in their deluxe to an AT7 to lower that gain.
Yep.
I've installed a post-phase inverter master volume. Or
a PPIMV.
Wow, look at you. What do you
mean? That's what they're known as.
Well, but 10 minutes ago, you didn't have that knowledge. So he's got that in there. And then he also uses a Weber Mass attenuator.
Right.
And all of these drop it, let's say 10, 15%, but collectively it's a very impactful difference.
Interesting. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Continue, Todd.
Mix
Sorry.
and match. Do it. All right. So now if you're like, yeah, I want to keep all that gear and I know it's never going to be exactly the same, or maybe you just like getting new gear. Like, hey, we all do, right? So what are we going to do now? Now we're going to cover low wattage amps, and a slew of caveats, and adjustable wattage amps, also with a slew of caveats.
Yep.
Now, everybody who is paying attention on Instagram and Facebooks and all this stuff is like, low wattage amps are pretty hot right now.
Yep.
And most of your favorite amp builders are making some form of a low wattage amp, even to the point of them being like almost like little console amps or even pedal board style. But
Yeah.
we're talking about like a low wattage, more general speaking amplifier. Okay. Some of our pal Drew Foppy, he's got one called the Los Dos. Jared's got that amp. That's a 2-watt amp. Also, the Greer Mini Chief, which is a 3-watt amp, which I've got I heard at his place back in Georgia, absolutely blew me away. The sound of that is incredible.
Yep. And there are plenty of mass produced amps too, like the Marshall Class 5. There's Vox AC 3.
AC1 is the smallest one.
AC1 is the smallest one.
AC1.
Right.
And
Tiny.
so there's all kinds, but the boutique ones are definitely well worth looking at.
Oh man, yeah, they sound fantastic. But okay, so with all of that stuff floating around, there are, the claim with most of these things is this, like, it's a low wattage amp, which is essentially going to make it sound like a roaring amp, just not at roaring amp volume, because you're going to be breaking up earlier, earlier, sort of,
We'll get
mostly.
Maybe.
Ish. Okay. I'm not the legal guy. I'm just saying, like, what the general this is what the the general
I love
understanding
it.
is.
You make a statement and all of us are like,
I'm used to that. I'm full of common knowledge. It's not always right knowledge. And then it's basically that you're able to have a more controllable sound, but also you could use it to do small gigs and stuff. That's what they're, common knowledge being sold as. Okay.
well, yeah. And remember this. So as we're talking about wattage, remember this, that generally, if all things are equal, as far as frequency response, your speakers, everything else, if you double the wattage of an amplifier, you will only gain 3 dB of SPL, sound pressure level, which is generally equates to like 1 notch louder, audible to your ear. So if you go from 50 watts to 100 watts, it's not twice as loud.
Right.
It's like 1 notch louder. What changes is your clean headroom.
Right.
How percussive it is, how clean it is before breakup.
Right. And maybe let me caveat this by saying just a little bit that when I'm saying it breaks up earlier, I'm not saying in just a dry signal, if you sent a signal through it breaks up earlier. It's the sensitivity. If you dig into it, it's going to be responsive earlier.
Yeah.
Than if you had a 40-watt amp and you tried to do that, it would just be louder.
Yes, absolutely. If you had, let's just we'll keep it kind of simple here. Let's say we compare a 5-watt amp and a 40-watt amp. If we ran the math on that, I believe it would be, the 5-watt amp would be 9 dB lower SPL than a 40-watt, okay? Which is noticeable. It's like 3 clicks. It's not half, but it's very noticeable, right? But to your point, everything about the 5-watt amp will break up sooner than the 40-watt at a comparable SPL level.
Right.
The output tubes, the preamp, the speaker, everything.
Which is great if you're playing like blues kind of stuff, or where you're kind of doing the slow quiet, and then all of a sudden you dig in.
Absolutely.
That's what blues sounds like.
And especially for blues, you can get that at a much more controllable level.
Right.
I don't know if any of you guys are hip to Chris Duarte.
Never heard of him.
Tony? Chris Duarte?
Who was he with?
Just say yes.
Nobody.
Oh yeah, I remember him.
Okay.
He's a good buddy of mine.
So-
I've done many projects for him.
Anyways, Texas blues player, kind of not really famous, but kind of a thing 20 years ago. You have to edit out not really famous in case he listens to this.
This is great so far.
He's great guy. But anyways, I saw him years ago at Chelsea's, tiny little bar here in Columbus, max capacity 100 people, right? Well, I walk in there, Tony. I'm sitting at the table all the way in the back. I had to leave halfway through. He had a 50-watt Plexi through a 212. He had a Viber King and
What?
something else.
The blues guy?
Blues guy. All three of these amps turned backwards. All of them running wide open and parallel at the same time.
Oh my God! I could see why you left.
It was so. I had cotton in my ears.
Why?
And I
What's
was
the
like, I
point of
can't
that?
stand this because his tone were these three amps dimed. It was
Jeez.
that point of breakup is what he wanted. So yeah,
Okay.
this is the guy that could use a small wattage
Yeah.
amp, you know. But that was his tone, was to push him all the way, get him to break up response, just like you're saying, so he could roll off his volume. It cleans up, he digs in,
Yeah.
and it barks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what I heard when I heard the Mini Chief. I did a little video on that on Instagram. It was like, I think it was about last year, so maybe, last year or so. So you may have to look for it, but the sound was just, it was fantastic.
And there are so many great options out there. Now, and we've talked about all the plus sides. You get it to break up sooner.
And they're smaller. They're usually cheaper.
All of that. All
Yeah.
of that. The downside is that it's smaller
Mm-hmm.
and you're never going to get the big sound from it. Meaning, and what I mean by that is
Pushing the air.
pushing the air.
That's something that Rob and I talked about when we were setting up the show, is like, I think that is one of the most misleading things about a small watt amp, because you're like, oh, it's going to sound like it, like we're asking it to. If you were putting it through a microphone,
It's not going to sound absolutely the same. And here's the thing. The relationship, what you were going for was to say that to your ear and how you're playing and playing it in the room, it's not the same, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
It's also not the same for the microphone. That's the thing is a lot of guys try to emulate these tones and then they put a microphone in front of it at a low level. Well, that microphone is also part of that chain. That SM57 being pummeled with 120 decibel reacts different than the SM57 at 95 decibel. Drastically different.
Got it.
Yeah, and it's the same relationship. That microphone is like your
So
ear.
you just put it closer. It's fine.
Yeah. but that's an important point. I'm glad you said that, because that absolutely
Right.
it'll still react differently.
Right.
Part of that, when you're trying to get that Led Zeppelin sound, it's the fact they had 4 Marshalls through 4 412s with these microphones that were just getting beaten down,
Right.
And when you turn everything down with attenuators, everything, the microphone's not going to see the same signal anymore.
Right.
So, and that's what I mean. So when you get a small wattage amp,
Tonally, you'll probably from the amp you'll get to where you
very similar,
it'll be similar
very similar.
in the tone wise, but the feel is definitely not going to be the case.
Which is that sound pressure level.
Right. Exactly.
What you're feeling in the room.
And the low end.
Absolutely.
The low end.
Absolutely. That's the first thing. Yeah. Remember, low frequencies always take more power to stay tight, unclipped than higher frequencies.
Yeah.
So when you start cutting the wattage, that's the first thing to go, quote, flubby,
Right.
is going to be your low end, your low mids.
Right. Right.
So yeah, and so there's your plus and minus. Is it you get a Mini Chief and it sounds fantastic for this sound at this setting, to play in your basement. But you take out to the band, it's like, man, I've gotten lost now.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a possibility if everybody else in the band's very loud and you're expecting a tighter sound.
Yeah.
Yada yada.
Good point. Excellent point.
Yeah.
Anything else that we need to know about low wattage amps?
It's something that you mentioned to me on the phone too. Let's not forget. Typically, low wattage amps, you said smaller physical size, smaller speaker as well, which will change the whole sound.
Right.
Because the smaller speakers typically don't have as wide of a frequency response. Usually in the low end is where they're really lacking.
Right.
So
and a little bit of the bright too, right?
I find a 12
like a 10-inch speaker versus a 12-inch speaker.
Yeah.
Or even 2 8s or something.
And if you compare them on a frequency chart, maybe the high end is supposedly there to my ear. A 12 always seems to have a little more extra like cut on the top end, not a harshness,
Right.
but just it stands out in a mix.
Yeah.
So if you get a really small combo, let's say like a Vox AC1 that's either an 8 or a 6.5 inch speaker in it, it's gonna sound
like an
much
8 or
more,
8.5. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And you
And the only reason we're saying that these things are fine.
Yeah.
But I think if you go out and you spend money on something, even if it's from a boutique builder, and you're like, this is a low watt amp, I heard it in the demos, this thing sounds amazing, and you get it and you plug it in and it just feels anemic.
Right.
May not sound anemic, but the feel of that is anemic. Then it's not necessarily that's a bad amp or it's a bad build or anything. It's like, well, that's what this is made to do.
like we started from the beginning, it's managing expectations. you
Yes.
know? Yeah. Expectations, all this. And this goes back to why a lot of guys still, one typical mod I do to a Fender Champ is I get rid of the RCA speaker plug on the bottom of the chassis and replace it with a 1/4 inch. Because so many guys love to take Champs and put them through a Marshall 212 or 412. Because you just crank them and they sound glorious through that. Where a Champ, on its own is very small.
Less glorious.
Yeah, I mean, it's got that very...
It's got a thing. It's a sound. It's its own thing. Yeah.
But yeah, when you take the same, what is that? Is that a 12 watt amp, Tony? A Champ?
Champ should be...
No, it's like 7 or 8, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's only got a single
66. Yeah. And it's throttled by I think you're right. I think it's like 7 or 8 watt. But so that can power Marshall 212, 412, and it's a cool raunchous sound, but
Sounds like a Champ.
Jared's awake and he gives us a zinger.
he woke up for a minute.
Hey, one other thing I would mention too about low wattage amps, sometimes the class of the type of amplifier that it is, whether it be a class A or a class AB, can make a difference in the perceived volume too.
Absolutely.
I mean, a class A amp, things like, a typical, like a Vox AC15 or a 30 always sounds louder, at least to my ear, than, a comparable output from a, maybe a Fender, Vibrolux or something that's an AB.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's interesting. It depends on many things. You're absolutely right. The class it'll not only change the perceived volume level or SPL, it'll also affect how the amp responds in every way as far as frequency and dynamic levels and everything. Because the output section of the amp works drastically different.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you in on a secret though. Not anything. A Vox AC30, we'll say, has 4 EL84 output tubes in it. It's cathode biased for Class A operation, but each one of those EL84s are capable of putting out 12 watts max. Meaning, in theory, just by tube data sheets from the 50s and 40s, and a Vox AC30 on paper is capable of putting out 48 watts max before clipping, right? I personally, an average AC30 exceeds 50 watts before.
Really?
Clips. Absolutely. Yeah. Huh. All day long. Likewise, a deluxe reverb, a 6v6 is capable of putting out 12 to 14 watts as well. A deluxe reverb, I've had some come through that put out more than 30 watts before they clip. So all of those wattage numbers with amplifiers is a bit of fuzzy math. And those are all also published ratings of the tube. I've had some Marshall 100 watt amps come through that have put out over 150 watts max from just a quad of EL34s. So that's all kind of fuzzy. But you also got to remember with all that, we've already talked about an increase in wattage by, even double, like AC30, let's say you go up to 50 watts, that's barely perceivable to ear. But what you hear, Tony, is that it's much more present. The low mids are much more immediate. And that's because that amp really is more of a 50 or 60 watt amp, not a 30 watt amp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the derail there, Tony. Okay, so last one. We are rounding the bend. These are adjustable amps. Now, this is something that intrigues me greatly because I don't have a massive amount of capital to invest in an awesome amp. One that I want for smaller gigs, one that I need for bigger gigs. I've run into that problem where I'm like, if I try to push my amp anymore because of either it's a not an optimum PA system, or it's like some kind of weird venue or something like that, it's radically going to change my sound.
Yeah.
Also, I want to be able to have it. I want both best, potentially best of both worlds. But that may be not what I need. Is that what you're saying?
No, here's the thing. And just like all these choices, there's no right or wrong. It's going to be a compromise, Todd.
Okay.
So there's a few different ways that these amp companies market adjustable wattage in their amps. One is actually, I can't remember who did it first. It's called power scaling is the buzzword or marketing term they've used for this. It adjusts the voltage, the plate voltage on the phase inverter inside your amplifier. The point of this is that it's after the preamp, before the output tubes, and as you turn down the plate voltage, it minimizes how much signal can pass to your output tubes as you turn this voltage down, down, down. So it's a way of controlling, yes, the amount of wattage out of your amp, but what you're actually doing is using a variable voltage to squish down or attenuate how much signal passes between the preamp and your output in your amp. This is used on Morgan amps. Trying to think, some of the Ignator uses this on a lot of their designs. So it's kind of fuzzy math, and some of these companies call
popular for combos.
Yeah, even.
I mean, that's where I see it, because that's where I live in combo land pretty much. So
yeah, and you're absolutely right. Yeah, but like I said, they're also on some higher, tube amp heads too. So yeah, a little bit of everything, but
usually in like a 1530, 2040.
Well, no, that's the thing. These are not typically switched like from 2 or 3 different settings. This is a linear control.
Oh.
At the bottom, it will say like 1 watt, and then you turn it up, and it'll.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's because.
So that's a different thing.
Yeah. And this, again, it's called power scaling usually. Or some companies, I don't know off the top of my head which ones call it adjustable wattage, but they do. Or some even put just power attenuator on the front of it. But what they're doing, if it's just a knob that just turns smooth, 9 times out of 10, they're adjusting the voltage to this one stage of the amp that basically acts as a valve to limit how much signal goes from the preamp to the output stage. This is important because it's not just going to change the wattage. As you turn that voltage down, it changes how that stage in the amp works. So it's not going to sound the same. Just like anything else, it might get you where you want to go because you only want to turn it down a quarter of the way, or you could play on it and go, boy, this completely changes my tone. This doesn't work for me. Just have to try the amp, listen to your samples online. If you're interested in brand X because you like the rest of the features, check it out and see if that's right for you.
Dr. Z's got one, the Z Lux.
Yeah.
It's a 20-40 watt combo. So for amps like that,
yeah,
that's a good option though, isn't it?
Yeah, and it can be. And these are anything that has a switch on it that will say, let's say like full and half power or high and low. They're doing it one of 2 ways. Either one, they have 4 output tubes in it. And remember, we kind of talked about this before where you remove 2 tubes and it drops to half the wattage. Mm-hmm. Some of these amp designs are doing exactly that with that full or half power switch on the front.
Right.
If you've got 4 output tubes in it, I'm trying to think of one right off the top of my head.
High Watt has that too. They got a T40. There, it's a 40-20.
40-20. And again, if it has 4 tubes in it, then what they're doing is they're turning off 2 of the tubes.
Okay.
If it only has 2 tubes in it, what they're doing is actually switching the wiring to those tubes from called pentode to a triode design, which will limit the maximum wattage that each tube can put out. And those are typically the high and low or half wattage. Again, they both have drawbacks though. When you remove 2 tubes, you're not changing the output transformer. You're not changing other things in the circuit, so it's a perfect match.
Right.
When you change the wiring from pentode to triode design, then the tube actually works slightly differently. So it's not just going to drop the wattage in half. And even actually it drops it about 30%. So it's not even true marketing saying it drops it in half. It'll drop the maximum wattage by about 30%, but it will also sound or respond different. And you may like it better, but it's not exactly a half power switch at that point.
Okay. I get it.
Yeah. And both of those things can be done or modified to your existing amp as well. If you have a deluxe reverb and you wish it was a little quieter, somebody could modify it to have a pentode triode switch on it, which would drop at about 30 volts.
I just checked on the Z Plus, the Joe Walsh Z Plus, and it says the inclusion of a half power switch drops the second 6V6 out of operation.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
because there's that one just has two 6V6s.
Okay.
Yep. So that one would then be
And the advantage of that is that that just goes back to a basic, like if you have a 40 watt amp, it's going to be really loud, and until you get to the really loudness, it's not going to be breaking up on its own.
It's not going to break up.
If you drop that down to half, you're going to be breaking up sooner. It may not sound exactly the same as the 40 watt amp, but pretty dang close.
Right. And like I said, and who knows, you may do that to your amp and go, wow, I actually prefer how this is breaking up differently.
Right.
Yeah. And again, and this is typically how amp companies are doing that high-low, full half switch. But there are also some, like Boogie is one that they will include both. So they may have an amp. In fact, they do have one out on the market right now. It just dropped. I can't remember. It's a new dual rectifier 2-channel amp. The 100 watt goes from 100 to 50 to 25. 100 to 50, it removes 2 output tubes. And then when it goes down to 25, the 2 remaining tubes are wired as triodes, not pentodes. So it drops the wattage again.
Wow. Okay.
So some actually have both of those.
Interesting.
Yeah, for multi-watt selection.
Well, if you are, looking for something that is going to be very, very versatile, and most of your favorite amp builders have some sort of a lot of the higher, the guys that are maybe bigger, not necessarily tiny boutique stuff. And then also our guest, Delisle guitars and amps, mostly amps. There was a funny thing about why it's called Delisle guitars. But anyways, you can check that on episode 157. But he's got at least one that I know of, that adjustable wattage amp. So smaller guys are doing it. Bigger guys are doing it.
Everybody's in on it now.
Yeah.
Everybody's got
So that's a good options. Ooh, doggies. This has been, I can see it in your eyes, Rob.
I'm spent.
You're spent. But boy, do we appreciate the amount of knowledge that you dropped on us. And I know, like you said, any one of these things we could have had an entire episode on. And who knows, maybe we'll revisit a couple of these things. Yeah. All right. We're going to mosey on over to wake up Jared from his deep slumber. Jared.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. This part of the show is fun because we get to play a game called Would You Rather? I made that rough. Would You Rather is right now. So this Would You Rather is from executive producer John Jackson. Thank you, John. Would you rather see a favorite band headline Glastonbury in a triumphant show that people will talk about for years to come?
That's one of those like 100,000 people, like the flares and flags over in the UK. Huge shows.
Enormous. Yep. Or see the same band play the same set in a small venue at a low-key warm-up gig. So that means you can kind of just get real close to the band and, it's not packed in like sardines. It's nice and casual and,
a lot of big bands do that. They just kind of sneak in and they go under a different name. And it's just for the people who like love the place and love music, and they're there and they're like, what the heck? This is that band? Huge.
It's like the Stoling Roans.
Yeah, the Stoling Roans would do that. I believe they have in the past, actually, done
Under that
stuff
name?
like that.
They have.
That's awesome.
Anyways, wow, that's a great question because I think, well, I'll tell you why I think, but I'll do that in a second. We're going to go to Tony real quick. Antoine Bolonsky, what do you want?
You know, maybe if I was a younger man, I would say the Glastonbury thing would be really cool. However, I have always preferred to go to smaller shows. In fact, if I go to a show now, most of the time I'm either, on the backstage side as opposed to out in the front. I just kind of, I don't like that big crush of the crowd or anything anymore. And I think it's a much more intimate experience to have, to see a band like that. I think they're looser a little bit too, because they're not, trying to make show. They're just playing the stuff.
You don't
that
feel
they
as
wanna
much
play.
of a spectator.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, as those big festivals, I think they're just really, it's a way to pack a lot of people in. And I've never been to the Glastonbury one, but I've seen it on TV, and it just looks miserable to me. Sorry.
Okay, that's quite all right. Jared?
Any day of the week, I'm going to go with the small venue.
All right.
I've done the small. I saw Rat at a venue like that. I know, because it was Rat. And the guitar player for Warrant also had a band that wasn't Warrant, but his own band that nobody knew who they were. And I got to meet that guy. Forgot his name. So, but
Great story, Jared.
yeah, it sucks.
More? Could you have any more details, Jared?
Do you remember the town it was in even? Or?
It was in Sandusky, Ohio, in a shopping center, like an old shopping center. It was bad.
Sandusky, Ohio.
Oh boy. Rob, what are you doing?
Because if you were a huge Rat, you got to like, you could spit at the guy and hit him.
If you're a huge Frat fan, why would you spit at him?
You know what I meant. You're less than a stone's throw away.
Yes.
Don't spit on the guy anyway. So.
No, that's bad.
No, that's disrespectful.
Yes.
The drummer, though,
That's
he would
rude.
drink water, and then while he was playing the drums, he would spit water out at the cymbals, and that water mist would go everywhere. He was doing that, hitting people,
I'm assuming that's
The horrible
pre-COVID.
80s nightmare.
That was not quite 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was probably a rough time for those guys.
Yeah.
I'd imagine.
Early 90s. All right.
Somewhat.
Rob.
This is easy. Small show. I don't like. I'll let everybody in the world in on this. I'm not a huge people person. I usually prefer things with 4 legs than 2. So yeah, I can't even think of. I don't know if I've ever been to a big show like more than 1,000, 2,000 people. I don't think I've ever been to a big show for anything.
Wow.
I look and I see them like, oh, so so-and-so is coming through. I'm like, oh, they're opening for these 3 major acts and there's,
Right.
it's 50,000 seat. I'm like, no, pass.
Yeah. Okay. My turn. I'm going to go. So the thing I struggle with is that it really does kind of depend on the type of band. There are certain bands that I want to see in a small venue because I want to share sweat. I want to feel it and just get right up in there and have that very intimate connection that we all know comes from something like that. There's a handful of bands loads of bands that I would like to get that from, but there's also something very, very special about, and I'm thinking about Oasis. I'm a huge fan of Oasis. Oasis in a small venue versus Oasis with 50,000 other people who are or even like the Stones. And when you're just like, everybody there
Singing every
is
line.
singing every single word with everything they have, and the lights, and just that is an experience that it is of its own.
Yeah.
So for that, I would definitely take the big giant show. Not one of these micro festivals where they have 100 bands and you only get to hear like 5 songs. Screw that. Don't want that. But at one of the big shows, like the headliner show at Glastonbury, you put, Oasis up there, or we put in your favorite band, whatever, that can command that kind of a crowd, that every single person there is going to stand up, stay standing, and sing their heart out, is so special.
Yeah, and like you said, they got the big production, and so when you're standing there, you're seeing the whole spectacle of it. Yeah.
Iron Maiden, that's another great one. It's like you want to see that with everybody else who's as happy as you are to be there.
See, now if I could do that, but be in a little pod in the middle where nobody could get 20 feet,
right,
I'd be there.
Yeah. Yeah, like when Metallica did the little pit inside the stage.
If I could be the only guy.
Right. The only guy there.
Well, me and maybe 2 of my friends or something.
Right. Yeah. Funny.
Maybe they could just get those big giant hamster balls. And
well, that is out. They're going to have to do festivals next year. So
everybody gets your own pod.
Right. When you go in, they throw you in a hamster ball and say, there you go.
Yeah. Nice.
And we'll get the vaccine.
That was a great question. I love that question. And it's a hard question for me because I have love for both. Like I'm going to slip this in. I like seeing the Hives at like a really small venue would be amazing. Yeah. Because it's a totally different kind of energy. It's a totally different show. Anyhow,
would the crowd be buzzing?
Oh, yes, they would be buzzing, and I'm not even going to acknowledge that terrible joke. Tony, we got to thank a few people, and then we got our parking meters up.
Oh my God, it's leaving. I think the tow truck's out there.
Yes.
So at this point of the show, we like to thank a special group of people. These are our executive producers. And you might be asking yourself, what is an executive producer? Maybe more importantly, how can I become one? Well, just go over to patreon.com/the Guitar Knobs and check it out. There's a couple of different ways that you can help us out, support, and become a patron of this very podcast. Each level comes with a bevy of great prizes, thank you gifts, if you will. And, it's things like barefoot buttons and stickers and picks and, oh my goodness, T-shirts, all the good stuff. It's all there. But there's a level that is extra, extra special, and it's the executive producer level. And in addition to all that great stuff, you get one more thing. And what is that, Jared?
You get to have your name read on the thing, man.
Your name read on the thing. That's what I'm doing right now. Special thanks to these executive producers, Mr. Tom Barazin, Martin Cliff, John Daly, Chris Carney, Darren Gregory, Doug Christ, Michael Van Zant, Ken Sayers, Brian Robison, Michael Senchuk, Stefan Lamb, Johnny Knowles, Anthony Lathrop, John Anglin, Tyler Bray, Brad Partridge, Chris Heidel, John Esterly, Doug Gann, Justin Jones, Brett Alexander, James White, Matt Hart, Liam Martin, James Pennington, Richard Kendall, Tig Harmon, John Williams, Michael DeLucio, John Jackson, Jason Roush, and David Rando. Thank you, executive producers.
Yes, we love you.
Humongous thanks.
Wait, Todd. Don't interrupt. No.
I'm just waiting for you.
Because there is a slightly higher echelon of executive producers. Those are our grand poobahs, these extra special group of supporters.
It's an extra higher echelon.
Extra high.
Yeah.
The penthouse suite, if you will.
Ooh.
In addition to all that great stuff and getting your name read on the thing, they get a special fez to wear whilst listening to the podcast.
Yes.
That's right.
And many other things.
And many, many flashlights and things like that. Shh, don't tell. Special thanks to these grand poobahs. Jonathan Jerusik, Corey Nigro, David Kaminga, Cody Lane, Cody Foster, Shaughness, Tommy Manesco, Mark Garton, Adam Johnson, Steve Keys, and Tim Nowak. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. You are a core reason, all of the people that we read off and others, that we have made it to 200 shows.
Absolutely.
I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I am truly grateful. And Rob, where
Todd.
can people check you out, find your stuff?
madcowamplification.com. Also on Instagram and Facebook, Mad Cow Amplification. And hit me up if you need something modded, repaired, if you're local, or if you want to send it from across the country. We take care of all that stuff for you. Authorized for most major brands as well.
Yeah, certified, not just authorized.
Yes.
A lot of amps Rob's done for me, and they all still work.
That's good stuff.
Well, you can put that on your website. How about that?
Yeah.
Tony, how about yourself?
Head over to pickguardian.com. Check out some of the things that I have available for sale. Most of what I do is custom work, so shoot me an email. Let me know what you need. I will make you something you are going to love.
That's
Agreed. Right. We all have proof of that, Jared and I, and maybe Rob will someday.
No,
Are those pick? Are those pick?
Yeah.
Do those pick guards still work, Todd?
They're amazing. They still work. They haven't broken yet.
Well,
Jared, how about yourself?
people want stuff that works. So if you have an old pickup that needs rewound from an old guitar or whatever, BrandonWoundPickups.com. Or if you need new pickups, I do the wide range. I have noiseless Jazzmaster pickups, which are super awesome. I got all sorts of awesome stuff like that.
You're known for your PAFs. That's your.
That is a bread and butter product. I've worked really hard to get the PAFs going. So yeah, that's a big one. So yeah. Find me. I'll take care of you.
All right. Brandon Wound Pickups. You can send me an email, todd@theguitarknobs.com. You can also DM me on Instagram @guitarknobs. We would love to hear from you. Send us a would you rather, for Pete's sakes. We get lots of good ones like we got today. It was awesome. I want to say massive thank you to Rob for swinging in here and dumping all that knowledge on us. I hope it helped some of you out there try to sort out your your audio issues with your gear. And I want to say a colossal thank you to every single one of the listeners that has been with us along this long road for 200 episodes. Very happy, very proud. Thank you all. And gentlemen, have a great guitar week. And everyone else too. And subscribe!
Yeah, could be the end of the world.
Todd, you ignorant slut. Tommy! There's two of me. Oh, no.
Jared, what is that in pennies? Let's go. We're wasting time, you clowns.
Do you run the auxes into each other, Jared, like for more attenuation, or?
I should try that.
It's not quiet enough. I had to buy two of them.
Thanks, Tony, for screwing this all up.
Now I can't even hear my plexi.
That isn't actually how they work.
I've got $6,000 worth of equipment. I can't hear my amp.
Okay.
Not Rob's, but not everybody's a Rob that goes to NAMM.
I hate to say it, but I agree with Todd.
That's not a bad idea.
He's doing that on purpose.
I hate you, Tony.
But he does it so well. You don't even know. It's like Tony is the equivalent of a silent fart. It was on my nope, that's not it.
I would buy that for $1, Tony. Boy, you missed it with that one,
Okay,
Todd.
sorry.
Gotta be honest.
Maybe a little less color, Todd.
So I'm not wrong.
You're not.
So I'm not wrong.
You're not.
So I'm not wrong.
But you're
I'm
not
just saying. All right, I'm going to clap us in and get us back to where some semblance of a show goes. Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/ facebook.com/theguitarknobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, 4 on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.